It is time for the Tin Can Radio Program.
Pascal's wager.
Pascal's wager.
Yeah, I was meaning to ask you, Patrick, how many oppositions or challenges did you find to Pascal's wager? Because you were looking for some counter arguments to look at, weren't you?
Yeah, I'd have to go through my list here.
Well, I figured the many gods argument would. Well, first off, we need to at least state the basics of what Pascal's wager actually is.
Right, but the point almost misses it on the many gods wager.
Yeah, well, it does and it doesn't. It is a legitimate, if you're taking it out of context, a legitimate a point, but it's a point that can be considered too. However,
well, yeah, I mean, if you're worshiping the wrong god, yeah, then but that goes back to, like I said, the hard work of not only what kind of God should we? Well,
I'm recording now, so we probably want to go ahead and actually state for whoever's listening what Pascal's wager actually is.
Okay.
So, do you think you can handle that one, Terry?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jerry.
The wager starts with the assumption that, first of all, you're never going to by reason come to a conclusion that God exists. And that since you are engaged, by engaged meaning you are born, and you are born into a world that some say God created, that presupposes that you are already in the game. What you're wagering is the coin toss that God is or that God isn't. And since you can't come to that conclusion by your own rationale, and you've been thrust into a world without any answer to why or what or how you came to be, you have to come to that conclusion based on the evidence that's at hand, which is slim to none. And what Pascal says is involved in this wager is you have everything to gain and nothing to lose if you're right. If you're wrong, you have very little to lose except maybe some lusts of the flesh. Any lust of the flesh. And if there is no God and you die and it's just annihilation, that you become dust again or part of the cosmos, then you've not lost very much at all. But if there is a God and he is who he says he is, and he does require us to come to him by faith, even if you can't believe, what you should do is pursue him to the best of your ability, which I found to be very interesting this week, given what James wrote, that if we draw near to him, he will draw near to us. And I think there's a lot of times in human beings' lives where consequences force us to draw near to him only to find that he reveals himself to us very clearly. So essentially, that's the wager. Is there a God, and are you willing to do what needs to be done to find this God? Even if you can't, what Pascal said was, then employ all of the methodology of faith, and in that employment of that methodology, you will come to a conclusion on your own through living by faith that God is.
Yeah, and that's why the objection to one of the objections is what they call the many God hypothesis.
Well, history has done most of our work. It's left us with three essential religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam.
Right.
And essentially paganism died out with the advent of Christianity because they realized it was nothing but superstition and fear. And so now we're dealing with three major religions. And given the fact that if you're a follower of Allah, he is rather inconsistent in his promises, because you could be a jihadist and you could decide, I'm going to kill as many Israelis as possible, but you might tick Allah off and he might send you to hell and then give heaven to the people you killed, because that's how inconsistent he is. So I think that
Allah is essentially unknowable.
Yeah, unknowable, and unknowable is a good, unknowable.
And he's capricious, capricious. He's not tied by his own word. He's so powerful that he can actually lie, which is really irrational if you think about it. If God is all-knowing, there's absolutely zero. The only reason any being lies is to either gain an upper hand, and God never needs to gain an upper hand. He is the upper hand, okay?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I think immutability is something that is immutability, the fact that he is consistent in all things, in all ways, at all times.
Right.
And, I'd bank my promises on that before I bank it on something that could be so capricious as to say, well, I really don't like you, so I'm going to put you.
Right. In Judaism, at least we'll call it the modern rabbinic Judaism, is not biblical Judaism. It's almost completely off the map with different strains coming out of it.
Modern Judaism is a response to first and second and third century Christianity.
Yeah, that's exactly it. But it's gone off the rails so much that the writings of the rabbis are far more important than the Torah. Okay. Well,
the fact that they decided that they weren't going to use the Septuagint, they went to something that most Christians disavow, and that is the Living Bible, or, a paraphrase. Essentially, that's what the rabbinic text now is, a paraphrase.
Right. Well, you have the Mishnah and the Talmud, which is essentially ancient writings of rabbis that they've gone and told you how to fulfill the law step by step, what you can and can't do. They've supplied all the rules necessary to supposedly fulfill the law. But if you match the law back up, then it doesn't do anything, because the law requires sacrifice. Yeah. And 20 centuries without a temple now, or almost 20 centuries, what are they going to do? They had to invent some system of, good works and et cetera, et cetera. Either that or was throw in their lot with the Christians. Yeah. And that was unthinkable.
Well, let's go ahead and back up and also look at this wager with the multiple gods objection anyway on top of it here. A lot of these different gods or other different religions don't hinge on belief in that individual deity, or they don't always hinge on an exact act of that individual deity. So a lot of times the behavior that you would have being a Christian, following Christian tenets and everything, by playing the odds, would get you into that afterlife anyway, if it actually did exist. So according to the wager, you would still benefit following your belief in God, even if you were wrong and some of these other religious faiths or gods actually was the case, which I don't think it is, but for argument's sake.
Right. Well, part of the argument, I think, too, is if you're going to propose that another god can possibly wreck the wager, you have to define that god. In other words, if the god isn't salvific or doesn't even care about the human race, then it can't, by its very nature, it can't wreck the wager, because you're basically wagering on atheism at that point. If the god doesn't require anything, or if it's like Buddhism, or it's basically atheistic at its core, you're arguing in a circle at that point. In other words, you have to define that which is disrupting the wager.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, into that wager than what Pascal wrote. I mean, I haven't seen the actual writings in Renaissance or whatever the letters that he wrote.
Pensée.
But the gist of it was, at that time, was a way of, maybe it was the first shot at apologetics. I don't know. But I think it's just simple. It's best to believe in God than not to. That's the wager.
Right.
You're wagering your life. So this multiple God, I don't think that had anything to. Now we're reflecting on it. We can use that example and stick it into today's world. But there are some biblical things that don't make this work. And the one I'm researching now was you're born with the innate understanding. I should say understanding. Everyone is born with an understanding of a greater being. Throughout, if you look at all history, all generations, all types of man, in all the religions, is always something higher than them. So right away, Pascal saying you can't come to reason. I see where that argument doesn't work, because you're born with an innate understanding of outside of yourself. There's something greater than you.
Yeah, right. But you can't, the whole thing is you cannot prove for certain what it is based off anything tangible.
I don't think that
you don't have empirical proof of God's existence.
Right.
But the wager is not proving or disproving the God. Right. The wager is, here's your life. You have a choice, believe or not believe. And that's so it's if you believe, what he's saying is it is better to live a life as if God existed. So one, if there is a God, you have glory in heaven at the end. If there isn't a God, you still lived your life in a certain way that's moral and characterly correct. And there's no loss anyway, because everyone's going to be close their eyes, dead, and that's the end of the world. It's for
Wait. Would this be a good time to bring in another one of the arguments or opposing views to Pascal's wager?
I guess.
That would be the idea that you can lead yourself by reason to believe something, but you cannot force yourself to actually believe in something that you don't think exists.
Right.
The example at one of the guys' cave, Cosmic Skeptic, I believe it was that what if it was necessary for any of us to believe that Australia does not exist? Can you force yourself to not believe in it?
Jerry's been there.
I got a piece of Australia on my desk.
There you go. You've been there, so you know better.
Yeah.
But I've not been there. Has any of the rest of you been there?
I have not.
No.
So your all's past experience don't prove for certain that Australia is there. Jerry's does, because he's got part of it there with him. But just because everybody else is convinced that Australia exists, does that make it true?
No. Yeah, but I don't think. See, because you're asking a physical, actual place where Pascal's wage is saying, hey, look, you may not see God, you may not hear God, you may not feel God, but it's better to believe in a God. And now he's coming from not a Catholic, from I forgot what sect he was part of. Actually, probably the first faith-based movement. But he's saying it's better to accept and believe and live that life than not to.
Politics and the two controlling political parties are destroying America. Both parties have spent your tax dollars with reckless abandon. Both parties are more beholden to party leadership than we, the people that they represent. Both parties value power above all else. Neither party respects the limits of the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. Constitution made this country great, and it's the U.S. Constitution that is the answer to our political woes. Forget the two ruling political parties and register as a constitutionalist. Support the U.S. Constitution, the just and moral society it creates, and not the two-party system. Join the only national political party that stands for the founding principles of the U.S. Constitution. Learn more, join and support the Constitution Party at